First ever Rootstock live stream. We're coming live from the Sainsbury lab in Cambridge in the middle of the Botanic Garden. My name is Russell Arnott and I'm from the Gatsby Plant Science Education Programme, and we're going to be showcasing lots of really cool, fun, awesome stuff all about plant science today. Who are you?
Morning, Russell. My name is Alex Jenkin and I also work for the Gatsby Plant Science Education Programme. And I am the project manager for the Science and Plants for Schools programme. So if you're watching from a school today, good morning. And we hope you're excited to learn some things about plants.
I'm definitely excited to learn things about plants. So essentially, I used to be a teacher. I used to be a science teacher. And whenever I used to say, hey, we're going to learn about plants for the next module, the kids would always just go, oh, plants, why? Because they just don't move, and everyone's just like, oh, they're just like green things that hang around and don't do anything. So today, we're here to just be like, no, plants are awesome. That's what we want at the end of this, for everyone to just run home and just shout in their parents' face, I want a plant tattoo. That's what we're aiming for, okay? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't one of Russell's students, but I was one of those students at school, and look at me now. So,
look at you now,
here we are.
sat next to plants and everything.
All of these plants telling you how great plants are, absolutely, absolutely.
So, I think it would be good to kind of kick off about like why we should care about plants to begin with. So, to kind of put things into context, what's happened is we have had a group of awesome bioscience students from universities across the UK, and over summer they went out and they made videos that explored all different aspects of plant science and why we should care about plants, the awesome things that plants can do. So essentially, we're just going to be celebrating plants and massively geeking out, and hopefully you'll enjoy this too. So without further ado, let's kick off with the first video, which is called Why You Should Care About Plants.
With two gardeners for parents, I grew up surrounded by plants, and as a result, the importance of the science surrounding them has always been clear to me. But as I worked my way through school, I realised not nearly enough people cared about plant science. When we think of where the best and brightest minds should focus their studies, we often think of medicine or law. When doctors save lives on the daily and lawyers uphold human rights, it's understandable why the smartest of us might be directed to subjects such as these. But I want to redirect your thoughts to plant science and why it deserves a spot on that list with medicine and law. While it's undisputable that doctors do save lives on the daily, in many cases it's the aid of plant-derived medicines that allow them to do so. In fact, before we had any major innovations in medicine, human healthcare centered around using plants in herbal remedies. And even with the innovations we do have now, plants still underpin everything we do. Homo sapiens, or modern humans, have always eaten them, and as we developed further, we started using them for building and clothing. And that's just the basics of it. More recently, plant scientists have been carrying out invaluable research that could ensure the global population can carry on living as we know today. Some examples of this research include looking into how editing the DNA of agricultural crops can make them able to grow in higher temperatures and less reliant on fertilizers, all of which will contribute to making sure we can feed an ever-growing population. Additionally, scientists are already utilising photosynthesis, the method by which plants take in carbon dioxide, as one of the ways to combat climate change. By planting new woodlands, we can reduce global warming and provide habitats for many animals in an act of both conservation and climate change mitigation. Finally, work is being carried out to see how plants can be used as mini factories for the production of chemicals, and in particular, vaccines, which have never been more relevant with the recent COVID-19 pandemic. I think that the way that plant science is taught in schools can often make it seem boring or unimportant. For example, I feel that before learning how plants capture CO2 in photosynthesis, we should learn why the products of photosynthesis are vital and irreplaceable parts of life, from chocolate to chemotherapy to eliminating starvation. I've really only just scratched the surface of the plant science world with this video, but I hope it gives you a glimpse of how interesting and exciting this field of work can be, and that if you can look past the syllabus and into pursuing a career in plant science, you could be at the forefront of a field ensuring an inhabitable future on planet Earth.
Fantastic. And I believe now we can be joined by Leah Walker, who made that video. Hi, Leah, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. That video was awesome. I think it just encapsulated all the awesome things about plant science in one video. So I guess, can you talk us through a little bit? I mean, the animation was beautiful and things. So what were your inspiration behind making that video?
I think when we had the whole Rootstock event in summer, we started off talking with each other and different plant scientists about, how plant science can be utilized. And when it came to actually picking a topic, I couldn't decide. I wanted to talk about GM crops. I wanted to talk about plants and vaccinations. And then I just kind of decided, why not just do an overarching video on, why you should care about plant science. And then we had an activity where we got to draw some things about our lives, and someone pointed out that I could be a little bit more creative with the video. So that's where the kind of idea to just do some hand drawings, and then having a photo of me in the beginning just makes it a little bit more personal. So yeah.
No, fantastic. So I'm curious as to, I guess, like what your relationship is with plants. Have you always been like, yeah, plants, or are you like gradually like, oh, actually, these are a bit more interesting than I thought, or like, yeah, like where are you? Yes.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Botanic Garden in Oxford, so very much surrounded by plants from a young age, and both my parents were plant scientists, so yeah, very much always aware of the importance of plants. And then both my older brothers are studying biology, I'm studying biology, so very much biology orientated, always been big fan of plants everywhere in my room. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed those. They look good.
Yeah.
So have you got have you got like an area of plant science that really excites you, that you're like, whoa, or a new piece of research that you're like super excited about, that you've been reading about? Or yeah.
Well, actually, as part of my degree, we had the opportunity to complete like a year in industry in third year. So it's actually been very relevant, kind of picking on an area that I want to explore and just looking at some of the adverts. I think I'm interested in certainly something centered around climate change. I like the idea of doing a bit of good, but also having fun doing it. And that's what plant science is enabling me to do. So I've seen some placements with kind of agriculture and developing fungicides, or with the Welsh Botanic Garden and doing research on pollinators. So I think something in that area. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I love asking people this question just because it's slightly annoying to people that do like plants, but do you have a favorite plant? And if so, why?
Oh, I think possibly a philodendron, which is the one just hanging here, purely just because of the way it hangs. I have another one on my desk right here. They're great. You can put them anywhere. But yeah.
A philodendron. Okay, I've not heard of one of those. They look and sound good. There we go.
Yeah, it looks really good. Yeah.
Cool. So thank you, Leah. It's been great chatting to you. And if you have got any questions for Leah about her video or about her placement, whatever, we have got the ability for you to ask questions, and we're going to bring everyone back at the end, and so you can type questions to Leah or our other panelists that we're going to. Any comments if you were like, whoa, that was really cool, I didn't know that, or nice animation, Leah, or something like that, you can comment in the box and we can pop your comment or question up at the bottom of the screen, which is really cool.
Fab. Can I just ask another question?
You certainly
Leah
can.
Russell? Thank you very
Go
much.
for it.
I was just going to ask Leah, but can you just we've already spoken to you about this, but it'd be great to hear about what degree you're studying at the moment and where you are in that, and maybe some of the options that people can get a bit of an idea of what's out there.
Yeah, so I'm just studying straight biology. I'm in my second year, and in first year we didn't have much option of the modules you could take, so you were just taking a mixture of human biology, cell biology, and there was a bit of plants in there. And I think that was quite good because it just gets you to explore different areas that you might not be sure you're interested in. For me, it kind of just affirmed that I, wasn't really interested in the genetic side of biology. So I've picked units that are more kind of about plant symbiosis and pathology. So that's looking at crop pests. And then next semester, I'm taking plant biotechnology, which then looks at how you can enable plants to be like sturdy against those crop pests. I'm still taking a few human biology units. I have a cancer biology unit that I have an exam for tomorrow, which I'm really looking forward to. But,
Good luck.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're not anti-human biology here at all, but obviously we're very pro-plants. So yeah, thanks very much, Leah.
Brilliant. So Leah touched on the importance of climate change and how plant science and climate change go really close in hand. And so next up, we've got a video that really delves into a group of plants which I feel are really important, but plant science purists are like, they're not proper plants because they don't have roots. And this really annoys me because this is my area of research. And it's all about plankton and the ocean. And this is something that's really close to my heart and I think should be included in plant science. And it makes me sad that plant science purists don't do this. But let's find out about plankton. Let's do that.
The oceans cover over 70% of the Earth. They contain a huge variety of life, from giant kelp to seaweed to algae so small they can't be seen without a microscope. In this vast underwater kingdom, size isn't everything. These organisms are called phytoplankton, from the Greek words for plant and wanderer. Phytoplankton roam the ocean and photosynthesize, using sunlight and CO2 to produce their energy, just as trees do. Phytoplankton's carbon dioxide sucking ability makes these organisms just as important as land plants in removing extra CO2 from the air. Phytoplankton are especially fantastic at removing unwanted carbon dioxide from the air, as they use the carbon dioxide they absorb to make sugars, which are converted into energy, allowing them to make even more phytoplankton. They can replicate themselves once a week, which means more phytoplankton and more carbon dioxide is absorbed. But why does this ability to absorb all this CO2 actually matter? You've probably heard of global warming and know that the Earth is getting hotter. But why is this? In short, the gases in the air act as a greenhouse, keeping in some heat from the sun and allowing life to exist on Earth. However, human activities such as deforestation and then burning this wood has released more gases which let less heat escape. Removing all this extra carbon dioxide from the air will let this heat escape again and allow the Earth to cool. Phytoplankton absorb CO2 and prevent more warming. They are called carbon capturers, as they capture and store the carbon from our air.
They are also the food source for many marine ecosystems. Phytoplankton are eaten by krill, which feed whales, sharks, and dolphins. They also serve as dinner for zooplankton, which are eaten by fish, and then birds, seals, penguins, and us. And if that wasn't enough, they are also a superfood, reducing your risk of cancer and heart disease, boosting your mood and immune system, and detoxifying your body. Scientists also believe that they could be the future of space travel, supplying food and oxygen for astronauts. However, there is so much more about phytoplankton yet to be discovered. As the ocean continues to heat up and waters become more polluted, we are at risk of increased toxic blooms and a decrease in oxygen production by phytoplankton, threatening all the life that it supports. This is why it's so important to do all that we can to protect our ocean, and that research of these amazing plants continues. Who knows what other superpowers phytoplankton might contain?
Brilliant. I love nerding out about phytoplankton. It's one of my favorite things to do. What a pastime. I'm so cool. I'd like to do that. Was made by India and Amy. We'd like to bring India into the studio now to chat a little bit about plankton.
Welcome, India.
Hello. Always great to meet a fellow plankton nerd. Amazing. So can you talk us through a little bit, like, why did you choose to do phytoplankton for your video? She's like,
Yeah, so
nah,
I think
mate.
phytoplankton is just something that really excites both me and Amy. Just the possibility it has, and the so much is unknown about it still, and there's so much more research that can be done on it. Yeah, so it's something really interesting in exploring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, I came from a physics background, and the more that I learned about phytoplankton, I was just like, what? It can do what? How awesome is this stuff? And it's really interesting that we have got, like, there's just so little that we know about. And all the time we're finding new species that do amazing things and have symbiosis and yeah, can literally sort out climate change and all the rest of it. So I'm curious, on your plankton journey, like, what was your coolest plankton fact? We've lost India. Power down.
But maybe this is time. I learned a plankton fact from Russell the other day, which is not strictly about plants, but that anything that's alive that's floating in the ocean and can't swim against the current is plankton.
Yeah, exactly.
So jellyfish are plankton, and they're not a plant.
It's true. So plankton, as they talked about on the video, comes from the Greek word planktos, meaning wanderer. So essentially anything that can't swim against the current is plankton. So jellyfish are. And what's really cool is some organisms exist for a little bit of time as plankton, like baby fish, like fish larvae. And then as they grow bigger and bigger, they stop being plankton and become fish.
So it's a bit of seaweed floating in the sea.
Plankton,
which is a plant. So.
Well, yeah, there we go. This is true. So things like sargassum seaweed. So in the Sargasso Sea, you've got the North Atlantic gyre that kind of brings all this floating seaweed together in a central bit in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Sargasso Sea. And that weed, sargassum, can be so thick that ships used to get stuck in it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, so the ocean current, so yeah, that technically would kind of be plankton, although it's kind of floating seaweed, I think.
Yeah.
There we go. So yeah.
India's back.
India's back, brilliant. So we were asking, before we lost you, have you got like what's like the coolest thing that you found out about plankton while making your video?
No, I'm still here. Sorry, my Wi-Fi's dodgy.
Hello, there's totally a delay here. Did you get my question about how awesome plankton are? And we want a cool plankton fact from you?
Oh, plankton produce 50% of Earth's oxygen.
Yes!
Nice.
There we go.
Nice.
This is it. So this is one of the things that winds me up at schools, is that when you learn about plants at school, everyone's always like, plants on the land, and they're the lungs, the Amazon is the lungs of the earth and all this. And you don't realize that all the time, phytoplankton are producing this oxygen. So even if we're miles away from the sea, we are still breathing in oxygen that came from the ocean.
The Amazon is still really important, Russell.
I don't
think you can dismiss the importance of the Amazon
I'm
rainforest.
not. However, I would like the little unsung heroes, the phytoplankton, to get a bit of a look in, if I'm honest. There we go. So we've actually got phytoplankton are so popular. We've got a second video about phytoplankton, which we're going to have a look at now.
Absolutely.
So,
thanks very much, Leah, for joining us.
Thanks, India.
Sorry,
you know,
terrible.
So let's roll the next video.
Britain, what a lovely place to live. Not too cold, not too hot, just right. Until we started to build factories and drive cars, and all this industry and burning fuel polluted the air with greenhouse gases. Like carbon dioxide, I made some CO2 earlier from vinegar and baking soda, It doesn't look like much or anything at all. It's transparent, but my gas detector can measure it. Since the gas is see-through, you might think that the clouds are getting darker for a spooky effect. Well, they are, but it's also because an increase in CO2 can cause chaotic storms. It affects energy in the atmosphere and air currents. I'll show you what it does using my miniature sun. On the right, just fresh Scottish air, where carbon is locked away underground and in the trees. On the left is the mixture I just made with CO2. There's too much for my detector to show, much more than in a polluted city, but this way, in 5 minutes, we can see a difference between boxes. Both are getting warmer from the energy from the sun, but the one with CO2 added absorbed more radiation and got a bit hotter. Extra temperature changes weather patterns to be more chaotic and leads to a warmer Atlantic Ocean, where Caribbean cyclones can potentially come into Europe, and also more storms occur in the North Sea in autumn. Last year, in November, Storm Arwen was particularly destructive here in Scotland because it came from an unusual direction. Trees here are used to winds coming from the west and are rooted to resist it, but they couldn't withstand a similar wind coming from the north. Seems like a good idea to take some of that carbon back from the atmosphere into solid form. I could plant a tree, but the box is not very spacious. Luckily, there's something much smaller that lives in the sea, and it gets the job done. Also, it doesn't mind the warming water. Algae, photosynthetic organisms, which globally absorb almost as much CO2 as trees do. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes. This one is called Spirulina platensis, and I've been growing it on my windowsill for a month. When I get the conditions to be just right in the enclosed box with stable temperature and water vapor, as well as a good circulation, I think I can just about see the little guys working and growing. Over the course of 3 hours, the CO2 goes down by 300 parts per million. In good conditions, I can take half of them out every 2 weeks, and they grow back. Some companies are using oils inside of the algae to make biofuel, burn and release CO2, and then capture it back into algae without much long-term impact on the climate. Or we could just eat it. It's edible, very healthy even, tastes.
Brilliant. I loved that video. The animations were so much fun, and I love the fact that it was an actual experiment with the numbers. I was like, that's brilliant. I really, really like that experiment. So we've got Mick, who made the video. If we could bring Mick in, that'd be great. Hi, Mick. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Hi. So, I mean, I was just blown away. So you grow spirulina on your windowsill?
Yeah, I do. Right now it's in a jar. I needed more space. I had too much of it.
Amazing. So just because I mean, I know that it's seen as like a health food and things, but how do you use spirulina apart from to save our planet?
I just add a little bit whenever I cook. When you just blend it in with everything else, you don't really notice it, and you get some extra vitamins there.
No, and what does it taste like?
It's similar to chocolate, but without sweetness and anything good.
Okay.
I've always thought it sort of tastes green. You know, like it looks green and it tastes green. Like, but it's very good for you.
So was that the inspiration behind making this video? You were like into spirulina before, and you thought, oh, it's got these awesome powers, and I want to kind of showcase these powers, or?
Well, I heard that algae account for 50% of all CO2 sequestration, so I got really interested in it, and I wanted to do something practical, not just research. I wanted to really see it for myself, so that's why I decided on doing an experiment.
Brilliant. So you've got obviously access to this experimental gear at home, and it was great seeing like you putting the tank together and like 3D printing the UK and stuff. So you've got access to all this equipment as well.
Yeah, it's just toys I buy on Amazon, really.
Fantastic. So yeah, I guess so. A little bit about you. So whereabouts are you right now, and like where are you on your plant journey? What are you studying?
Oh, environmental science in Aberdeen.
Cool.
Yeah, I learned quite a lot. There are some amendments, some improvements I could do to improve the video. But yeah, I learned a lot about it.
Fantastic. And I guess, so, I mean, one of the things that I've recently been looking at is there's companies now which are building these big algal growth ponds on like coastal desert areas, then growing the plankton, the phytoplankton or the algae in that, drying it out in the sun and then burying it in the desert as carbon sequestration. So I was like, okay, it's for me, it seemed a shame that, you know, we could use that potentially for something fun as opposed to just burying it. So I don't know if that's something that you've come across before or.
Well, obviously, if you burn it, then it just goes back in a cycle.
Yeah.
So you actually use a special breed for that. We engineered algae to have more fat in them, so they are more oily and they make better fuel. Well, I think that's more useful because you can make money, right, and expand your growth operation if you do that. If you just bury it, then you're not making anything.
So you'd like to essentially see, I guess, kind of see algae as replacing our fossil fuel reliance.
Yeah. I think from just economic standpoint, it would be much easier to do than to justify investment. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. One of the things that so on the same site here, there's also what's called the Algal Innovation Centre, which is set up to grow large quantities of algae in different ways, sometimes just in a sort of hanging plastic bag, and then sometimes with air bubbled through it, and so it looks a bit more high tech. And one of the things that they're wanting to do with that space is to actually turn it into somewhere where businesses who've got ideas to do things like that, to use algae for carbon sequestration or as food or as fuel, where they can come and test those ideas and really see if they scale up. Because there's been times in the past where that's kind of been done, but it hasn't been very effective. And then there was a kind of algal boom and bust. And then there's this rising interest at the moment. So hopefully that will, be able to sort of test some of those ideas and have some successes there.
Fantastic. Cool. So are you hoping to go into commercial algal production?
Yeah, that would be quite nice. We do grow for food algae here in Scotland. So much larger ones. We do grow kelp. There's a big culture around it. So if not biofuels, then probably that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think seaweed can save the world as well. There we go. Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much, Mick. It's been great chatting to you. And again, if you've got any questions for Mick, India, or Leah, who we've seen so far, then please do pop them into the chat box, and we can chat about those at the end of our Q&A session. But right now, we're going to go over to the sofa. Who's on the sofa?
I don't think no one knew there was a sofa.
There was a sofa right here. There we go. Hello. Who are you on our sofa?
Hello, I'm Pallavi Singh and I'm a lecturer at the University of Essex and I study plants. So I'm a plant scientist and I try to understand how plants can make their food, which in turn is our food. So just improving that and thinking about climate change and how we could cater to the needs of like global food security in the face of changing climate.
Right. Okay. So that's a lot. And essentially you're trying to save the world.
Yes.
Yeah, and feed
like that.
Save the world and feed everyone
Absolutely.
At the same time. Double whammy. Okay. So what we've got is a quick video about sustainable agriculture. So I think it'd be cool to watch that video and then have a chat with you about that, if that's cool. Brilliant. And if you've got any questions about for Pallavi, do pop them in the chat. Cheers.
Hi everyone. My name is Yoko and I love food. The world population is expected to be nearly 10 billion by 2050, and it's apparent that the increase in crop yield is crucial in order to meet the demand. Whilst there are many ways to tackle this problem, I focused on plant-based agrochemicals since I have a chemistry background. Agrochemicals are chemical products used in agriculture, such as fertilizers and pesticides. The word chemical sounds scary, and you're right. Agrochemicals do help increase the crop yield significantly. However, many of them used today have negative impacts on the environment and human health. The solution to this could be plant-based agrochemicals. One of the examples is mucineic acid. Mucineic acid is synthesized inside barley and is used to absorb ions, which is an essential plant nutrition. By synthesizing this in the lab and using it as a fertilizer, it promotes plant growth even for plants that do not have the ability to synthesize mucineic acid. This method has the potential to enable agriculture using sand from desert, and researchers are currently working on how to synthesize this acid in a much cheaper way. After reading this research paper on nature communications, I was lucky enough to visit Professor Namba, who is in charge of this research.
というのはですね、まず植物の本来持っている力をサポートして、でそれをそのままなんていうんですかね、植物の本来の力をサポートするというところが主なところですね。なのでいろんな植物にも使えるというところが意見のところです。
では最後に未来の科学者になりうる学生たちに一言お願いいたします。
研究で世界を変えるということが可能ですので、皆さんが開発した一つ一つの研究の結果が将来世の中を大きく変えて豊かな世界を作っていくということができると思います。ですのでぜひ好きな科目を見つけて一生懸命勉強して、そしていい研究者になって、人類に貢献できるようなしていっていただければなと思います。
ありがとうございます。
In conclusion, it is crucial for us to think about the ways to produce large amounts of food in a safe way so that we can keep on enjoying food as part of our daily lives. The future may be in the hands of young scientists.
That was a beautiful video from Yoko there, and she was such a big food enthusiast, and those photos at the end were all dishes that she'd actually cooked. And unfortunately, we were hoping to chat with her from Japan, but unfortunately she's got COVID. So to Yoko, when you finally end up watching this live stream, we hope you get well soon. There we go. So what we've got is Pallavi, who is our food scientist expert. So you kind of touched upon briefly before the video how you're trying to solve food security and climate change.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how to, these are quite big things, how should we do this?
So my research is focused on photosynthesis, and I'm trying to understand why some plants, for example, like maize and sugarcane, have an efficient version of photosynthesis as compared to like global staples like wheat and rice, and understand the regulation and the mechanism that goes on in this efficient version of photosynthesis. And if we could understand that, translate some of those aspects into like wheat and rice so that they could be more efficient, not just like in production of grains, but also use water and nitrogen more efficiently. So that would make these plants produce more seeds, for instance, to feed the world, and also use less fertilizers and less water. So it's sort of like a win-win situation altogether. And that's what my research is focused on.
That's amazing. So some plants are awesome at photosynthesis.
Yes.
So we have this idea that all plants, you put a light on them and they take in carbon dioxide and pop out some, that's a scientific word, they pop out some oxygen. But some plants are better at this than others.
Yes.
So
there's this enzyme called rubisco. Sorry, it's getting a bit like jargony, but there's this enzyme that's like crucial for photosynthesis called rubisco. And rubisco can also do an oxygenation reaction rather than like just fixing carbon dioxide. So when you have oxygen in the air, it does the side reaction which produces a toxic compound. So that's actually like not very efficient for the plant. But like other plants like that I mentioned, sugarcane, maize, millets, sorghum, like some of the plants that were quite crucial to the indigenous population in the southern part of the world, they were always like focusing on these plants that were actually efficient for photosynthesis. And that's why I say that we're trying to understand the mechanism that goes on in this efficient version.
Brilliant. So taking the efficient way
Yeah.
and putting it into plants who are less efficient, that's a really good idea, I think. And it's just unbelievable to think that we have the technology to be able to do that kind of thing and understand and unpack plants. And yeah, and similarly, like to produce, you know, if you think, you know, growing population, which we need to feed, but also land use is becoming more and more important. So trying to get more out of every, you know, square metre of land with less fertilizers, less pesticides and less water is a useful thing.
Yeah, because the freshwater reserves are also dwindling. So it's actually important to think from like a holistic point of view that how we could cater to the demands that we have in the future in the face of climate change.
Fantastic. Cool.
Yeah, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, Pallavi, but I think it's Rubisco that's like the most abundant enzyme on Earth.
Yes.
Like there's just so much of it in the world that, yeah, it's the most...
That's a good fact.
Yeah.
There you go. And so, hey, what's the most abundant enzyme? I must admit, not being, I'm new to Rubisco. I thought it sounded like an energy drink.
Ah.
New Rubisco.
Rubisco Disco.
Delicious. There we go. Yeah. So who doesn't like Rubisco? So that's absolutely fascinating research. So you've just started at University of Essex as a new group leader.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like?
It's quite fun because right now for the last 3 months it's just been like putting in the ideas that you have for research into words and like try to get it funded. So just putting in grant applications and all the fancy ideas that you've been thinking about, like plants, just writing that down, putting it into funding agencies, and then just hoping that I get some money to like do that cool experiments in science.
Nice. So are you trying to like assemble an Avengers style super Rubisco team?
Absolutely, that's what the plan, and like saving the world. So we are getting like this superhero arsenal all ready to save the world.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's really exciting. Well, good luck, Pallavi. I mean, for everyone, I hope Pallavi does a really good job at feeding us all and saving the world in the future. Fingers crossed for this, Pallavi. There we go. And so again, if you've got any questions for Pallavi about her research, about her career pathway, anything like this, then please pop a question or a comment into the box at the bottom of the YouTube thing. So we're moving on. We have got a video now by a gentleman called Thomas, and he went out into the woods and he just went out into the woods. No, he went out into the woods and he made this beautiful video all about biodiversity in forests. So let's roll the video and then let's hear from Thomas.
Can you hear and see any of the differences between these forests? You might have noticed one was lighter than the other. You might have noticed one had more life than the other. You might also have noticed that one of the forests was a lot quieter than the other. Do you know why this might be? The answer might surprise you, and it's all to do with plants. Let me tell you the story of Britain's forests, and it might explain what you see today. Welcome to Carrickfern Wildwood. Thousands of years ago, much of Britain would have looked something just like this. At the end of the last ice age, Britain was covered end to end in lush mixed forest, teeming with wildlife. It was biodiverse. Humans lived alongside this for thousands of years. But over time, our needs changed. We began to use more land for forestry. We began to hunt more. We began to chop down trees for fuel. And slowly but surely, our native forest was pushed back, and along with it, our native species. As Britain began to industrialise, this only compounded the problem. And while we were industrialising at home, the Royal Navy was waging wars overseas at the expense of British forests, cutting it down for timber for their ships. By the early 1900s, Britain's forests were becoming endangered. The need for wood during World War I was so great that forest cover in the UK was down to only around 4 to 5%. This led to the Forestry Commission being founded as a matter of national security, as Britain could not afford to be without its own timber. As a result of this, through the 1900s until now, Britain's forest cover steadily increased. Britain's forest cover now sits at around 13% collectively, and as high as 20% in some places like Scotland. Now, this success is mostly thanks to the type of forests you can see behind me. These type of forests are known as plantation forests, and they're mostly made up of species like spruce, pine, and larch. Now, why are these forests different? Well, let's take a look inside, and I can show you and tell you why. As you can see, there's not really very much going on in this forest other than the trees. The ground's quite bare and it's quite quiet. Now that's because of a couple of reasons. Firstly, because most of these trees aren't native. They're not from the UK. They've only been grown here inside the UK for some of them only about 200 years, some of them less, maybe about 80 years. And secondly, these trees are grown for a single purpose. They're like a field of crops. They're like wheat or they're like corn. These trees are grown to be cut down, just like this plot here. Now think back to the differences you see in here. Think, how does this relate to what I've just told you, and how this relates to biodiversity? Forests like these are the kind our wildlife needs to be supported. They offer a rich variety of plant species, which encourages a rich variety of wildlife to live within them. These are the forests we all know and love, the forests you walk through and you can hear the sounds of wildlife as you pass. Mixed plant species act as the anchor that underpins wildlife. They make these forests what they are. They make them biodiverse. They make them rich with life. Forests like these, which our most precious at-risk species need, are not widely spread within the UK. I can hear you saying, why does this matter and what can I do about this? Well, let's go back outside the forest to talk some more. And that's because Carrickfern Wildwood used to look something just like this. It used to be a piece of land for grazing. Rewilding only began in the year 2000, and planting slowly increased up to what we see today. And the Carrickfern project is not the only rewilding project in the UK. There are loads of really exciting rewilding projects all over Britain. And we're going to need more of this if the UK is going to hit its 30 by 30 target. And that's where the UK has signed up to protect 30% of its wild area by 2030. And it can start doing this by promoting and increasing the protection of the wild forest. Plants are superheroes. They do everything for us. They give us food, they clean our drinking water, they provide our air. Without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. But plants aren't only for us. They're also the delicate platform on which nature exists. They're the anchor for the natural world. And that nature is delicate. It's linked in complex ways. We need to promote this nature so we can make sure that Britain is a wild and biodiverse place for generations to come. Go and support your local rewilding project.
Thanks very much to Thomas for making that video. And we're very lucky to have Thomas with us on the sofa today. So thank you for joining us. Just to kick off our questions, this is obviously something that you care a lot about. Is it something you've been thinking about before you started making this film, or is it something that came to you during the process of thinking about what you were going to do?
It's a good question. I think forestry is something I've always been quite interested in. Like, I've got my dad's an arborist, so like I spent a lot of time as a child around forests. So I think this project, the entire thing was I wanted people to understand that if you kind of stop and listen and look around, you can sort of hear and see the differences in the wildlife around you. And plant species are the bedrock for that. They provide the platform on which we exist. So if you don't have diverse plant communities, you don't have diverse life.
Brilliant, thanks Thomas. We're also joined on the sofa by someone else. We've got Katie here as well. Katie works in the Botanic Garden here in Cambridge. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll chat to you both about some things around biodiversity and plants.
So I'm a horticulturalist and I work in the Nursery and Experimental Department in Cambridge Botanic Garden. And my role there is to look after rare and indigenous species throughout the world in the glass houses. Some of them will be on the BGCI endemic red listed species list. And then we have the front range, and so basically the front range is there for visitors to engage with the rare and wonderful species we have throughout the world. But there it's also a platform to showcase species in the Canary Islands, which are endemic to, there's 350 plus species of flora and fauna that are endemic to just that country. And it's got a rich habitat from very inert substrate on the volcanic substrate on the front of the island. And when you go into the island and go further in, it's more of a rich biome in terms of the range of flora and fauna that can grow there. And so, yes, my role is to keep these species alive and to work with researchers and to work with the general public. So yes, very much, again, like you said, using it as a platform for that.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks very much. So you're talking about having there's a different parts of in the Canary Islands. There's some places where there's not very many species that grow, or there's lots that they just don't need very much in the soil. If that's that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. The country, the Canary Islands, is made up of many islands. Gran Canaria being one of them, and I spent 3 months there working in the Botanic Garden. And very much we were plant collecting on these, barren areas where you've got literally very inert substrate. So what I mean by that is very sandy soil, no nutrients whatsoever, and very hostile environments. But then you can be on the same island, get on a bus, climbing up into the mountain area, and be in a very rich, very biome-rich environment in terms of cacti and agave can grow there, and it's a lot more humid and perfect for those plants. So I think it's just quite interesting that in on the same island that you can have that. It's a volcanic island, and that's why you've got that inert substrate in the front. But it's just I think it's very fascinating how you can have so many diverse species within just one island.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is both of you touched on sort of like the richness, the species richness beyond plants. And one of the things we're always trying to communicate about plant science, and one of the things that can be challenging is that people pay lots of attention to animals because people see them as more charismatic and they move and they make noises, and plants do move and make noises as well. They're just a bit more subtle about it. But I think, so I don't know if either of you got any ideas about how we can encourage people to, because you were saying stop and listen, but when you're listening for birds, not necessarily for plants. So any ideas on how we can think about encouraging people to think more about the plants in the environment rather than the animals?
It's a good question. I would say getting people to understand and see the beauty in the UK is so rich with all its diverse flowering plants. Getting people out there and seeing these flowering plants will get people engaged with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most amazing things about even if you live in a city, you can see plants everywhere, and you sort of you'd be walking along the pavement, and then there's plants growing in these cracks in the pavement where there's not really very much for them to use as nutrients. A bit like some of those plants growing on that very bare substrate in the Canary Islands, where they're just not. They don't need very many nutrients, so they can really survive in these incredible places. And I think that's one of the cool things about plants.
I just like to check that the word substrate means soil.
It means growing media.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
okay. So like sand, gravel, a pavement. Is pavement substrate?
Yeah, it's pavement substrate.
There we go. That's what I've learnt today. I'm going to be like walking on the substrate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Walking home on the substrate. There we go. Brilliant. Yeah. So I guess what's quite interesting. So you touched upon the Canary Islands. Obviously, this isolated group of islands out in the middle of the ocean. That's and because of their isolation,
quite close to Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but evolution has allowed these very particular plants to kind of evolve in this environment. So I was curious, is there one like, whoa, this plant in the Canary Islands, this is the most awesome plant, this is what it's all about, this is what I go to the Canary Islands for, and I'm really excited about this particular plant?
I think just cacti in general, there's a huge range of cacti and agaves, and they're huge. They're just like weeds everywhere, all over the island. I've been lucky enough to gone to Australia, and that country's full of eucalyptus, and we have proteas and the botanic gardens, etc. And it's amazing for its landscape. But Gran Canaria, it's a very small island. All these plants around you, the cacti, the agave, just popping out from every single angle, very happily large, just growing happily, populating all over the island, just like weeds, I think is quite a sight to see. And I think if you're lucky enough to go there, forget about the clubbing, go there for the plants, and get up into those buses and go right up into the top of the mountains. And it can be a very scary ride because those bus drivers are quite interesting, but well worth it. Yeah, and the sights that you'll see will be a real
I like that idea.
Food for thought, and if you want to get motivated about why you're in plant sciences and bring it alive to yourself, then sometimes going to these countries, or even growing some seeds, and giving it a go at home and propagating plants is a really good way, I think personally, to see how plants grow, how they can come together and really get your taste buds in a botanical way, thriving, and
Fantastic. So I was going to say a similar thing. So obviously you had a background with a dad who's an arborist, and you went out to these awesome forests and things. Well, one awesome forest, one slightly less awesome. And I'm curious as to whether you're like, this is the particular plant that gets me, or particular tree. Although tree is a plant, we had this conversation before this started, which is like your favourite, which is the one that you're like.
I'd say the mighty oak tree. And they're just the most fantastic beings in the UK. You can see them all over the countryside. They sort of sit alone in the fields, but they're nice and slow growing. They're just the most beautiful tree you'll ever see.
The mighty oak.
And they do support lots of other species as well, that's right. I know we were saying let's think about plants, but they are important because they're connected to other things as well. So
I was curious as well from something that you said, we're kind of linking this kind of plant animals thing together. And we're like, animals are great because they make noises and they move. And then you said, well, so do plants. What noises do plants make?
Oh, that is a good question. I think all sorts of plants. So if you think about seed pods popping open, that makes a noise when that happens.
Okay.
You can sometimes hear water moving through vessels in plants. I think in eucalyptus, if I'm looking, sometimes you can put your ear against the eucalyptus tree and you can hear the water moving in the water vessels up the eucalyptus. Sounds like a sort of like slightly popping, bubbling noise because they just take up so much water.
That's That's incredible. I saw this experiment, and please, plant scientists, correct me if I'm wrong, that roots, as they grow, they make a noise. And then if you record that noise and you play it back to the plant, then the roots grow towards the noise. And similarly, is there an experiment where you can play? So we have got a studio audience here. So if anyone knows this experiment, please shout out. There's that one. There's also the one that the plant can hear flowing water and its roots can go down towards grow towards that. I'm obviously just talking.
Yeah,
making things up right
now. There's a Radiolab episode where they talk about plants growing towards pipes that don't even have leaks, but I don't know any more. I don't know any more about the scientific basis of that, or whether that could be they're just leaks that we can't detect.
Okay, fair enough.
Confirmation bias or something like that. So confirmation bias being when you think something's happening and then you see something that makes it look like it's happening and you think, oh, it must be happening, without properly testing it. Okay, fair enough. Okay, that's the thing I'm going to look up after this, how plants make noises and how plants can hear. We can pop some of that on the Gatsby Plant Science Education Twitter feed. Yes, definitely. There is a tree also called what you're talking about, seed pods. There's a thing called the dynamite tree. And those seed pods, they look like wooden oranges, and they hit the ground and they explode, and the chunks of wooden oranges can get, like, the individual segments of that orange can get thrown up to 90 meters. So they can be like a little bit dangerous. They're quite explosive. And I think just to add on that, just thinking about plants making noises, if you think of animals making noises to communicate, but plants communicate without making noise. So they communicate through chemical signals, less of a wave, but they communicate through chemical signals both that are released through the air. So plants can signal, one plant can signal to another plant that, so if they're related, for example, they'll send out chemicals to say, I'm being eaten, get your defences ready. Or they can send messages that can travel through the underground fungal networks that are enmeshed, enmeshed with the roots of the plant. So plants can communicate. So we think of them as not, and they of course communicate to things like pollinators by having flowers that are attractive. So that's a communication to a whole different kingdom, not just to another plant. So I think it's just changing the way that we look at plants. So plants are a little bit like Dr. Dolittle in that they can communicate to different animals, whereas we can only communicate to ourselves. I didn't even think of that. And we use plants to communicate to each other as well. If I give you a bunch of flowers. Sinister Llama, thank you. Thank you, Internet. Sinister Llama, hanging out there, supporting my science. Thank you. Sinister Llama, I love you ever so much. Thank you for proving me right. That's the most important thing about this podcast, that I am right. No, I'm joking. So we've got some questions. Have we got any questions? And similarly, studio audience, if you've got any questions for any of the people who buzzed in, should we get the people back in who came in, like Mick, India and Leah, if they're still hanging around? Hey, here we are. There's Mick. Hey, there's Leah. Awesome. Studio audience or people at home, any questions?
I have one question for Pallavi.
Pallavi, can we squeeze Pallavi back in quick? Pallavi, run back in. Wait, there we go. Right.
And this can also be for
Katie
as well. What was your undergraduate leading on to your now careers? What did you guys do?
So just in case you didn't hear that at home, the question is, what is your career pathway? How did you get to where you are? So should we go for Pallavi first?
Yeah.
Go on then.
So I did not do my degree in the UK. So I did my undergrad and master's in India. So I did a biology undergraduate. So it was all like natural sciences. And then I went on to study biochemistry. So understanding more about like what goes on at the cellular level. And then did a PhD more focused on like plant molecular biology. And then a few years of postdoc, which is to add to the experience of research and things. So I was a postdoc at the Department of Plant Sciences at Cambridge, and now I've started my own research group. So just training the next generation of scientists.
Cool. Right. And Katie?
So I've been in horticulture since I was 16, and I went to a place called Cape Manor College, and I did a BTEC National Diploma in Horticulture for 2 years, which is equivalent to A-levels. And then I was lucky enough during that time to study in Finland and France in different glass houses and different botanic gardens and environments. And then I came over to Botanic Garden, did the traineeship here, and it's now equivalent to a first year of a degree. And then I went to Reading University and Whittle College and studied international horticulture and environmental management, and I have a BSc honours in that. And then I went on to work for David Attenborough in his garden there and put that together with a garden designer. And then I went on to become I worked as a researcher for the BBC Gardeners World, so establishing the programmes there. And then I helped to set up the Sainsbury's laboratory when it was first started, the horticultural department there, because in 2011 this was a brand new facility and we didn't have hardly the labs were set up, or the horticultural departments, the growth rooms and the glass houses, so they had to be set up. And now I'm doing my current job at the Botanic Garden. So I think horticulture and plant sciences, I was on the Gatsby Plant Science scheme and I very much enjoyed that. And I think it's a fabulous career, and the great thing about it is meet people like yourselves who make these great videos, and hopefully slowly but surely everybody will play a part in helping to better understand plants, better understand the environment, and collaborate within that small way or large ways that everybody does. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I like that you just casually dropped into conversation there that you used to run David Attenborough's garden.
Yeah.
So, could you just elaborate on that slightly? Did he come in and be like, Katie, I need you to plant me a cactus here?
So the truth of it is, we went through a recession after I finished university, and I joined a horticultural gardening company in London, and they kind of, how to describe it, they put me out to work in various gardens throughout London, and one of them was David Attenborough's garden. So I worked with a garden designer called Kim Wilkie, who basically, in his Richmond home, he bought a space next door, and he extended his garden. So I worked with the garden designer there to basically bring his idea alive. So that included a brilliant pond, and you can imagine a large kidney-shaped pond with a plethora of trees and meadows, so I brought that design alive. And I would go back and forth throughout the year. It was a real pleasure. And I got to meet David Attenborough several times. And he is exactly the man that you see on TV, if not better. So yeah, he didn't let his side down on that. So yeah, a real inspiration and something I would take to me forever. So yeah.
I think I'd definitely be a bit nervous designing a garden for David Attenborough. You'd be like, I hope he likes it. He's seen like every plant on earth. No, that's really exciting. Well, what an amazingly varied career. And I think I'm interested because you talked about your dad being an arborist. So did he bring you along on tree journeys?
Yes, so he actually started out as well as a horticulturist. So very similar background. Moved into doing things like tree surgery, but yeah, I was dragged around.
Did you get involved?
Far too many gardens as a child, yeah. I think maybe that's where my love of plants has come from.
Okay, awesome. Cool, so have we got any questions online? I've just been trying to keep an eye on it, in which case I think we're probably coming up to time, aren't we? So, unless we've got any, we got a question? 5 minutes. 5 minutes left. Have we got any other questions? Oh, come on, humans at home.
I mean, we have a
Celia. Hi, Celia. She says, excellent presentations, everyone. Well done. What does the panel think about the value of single statements, e.g. plankton producing 50% of Earth's oxygen, as a means to motivate sceptical students? Sceptical students, I mean, come on. Surely you just hear that awesome fact and just be like, now I want to get a plankton tattoo. Like, that's what happened to me.
Maybe not if you're a school kid.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's the big sweeping statements like that. It's what Celia wants to know. If you've got a big sweeping statement, does that help motivate people?
I think it's, sorry, jumping in there. I've got that, that's part of my background is in science communication. So I think sometimes we use these big statements to say, to draw people in. It's a hook, isn't it? It's exciting. It's what do people care about? People care about being able to breathe oxygen. I'm
a fan of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, that's something, or to hook people in, or thinking about food. I think it can be more challenging to do things around biodiversity, because that doesn't necessarily, I think it's harder to link that to something you experience, or can be harder to link that to something you experience every day. But yeah, I think they've got a value in drawing people in and in drawing interests. And I think obviously these ideas, they are complicated, and they're not necessarily you can't say they're not always fully true or fully untrue. So there's a bit of nuance in there. But that's part of what science is about, I think, and exploring those ideas. And you know, we have to.
I think I like a good fact, like a boof that gets hit, and then you're like, oh whoa, I didn't think of that, you know. Like, and this is what I found out with my plant journey all the time. I'm like, what? I think like every week I find out like a brand new plant fact that blows me away. So there we go.
And then once people are really interested, you can say, well, actually, that's not fully true. And then they're really interested. They want to find out more about it.
Yeah, everyone likes exceptions.
That's
exactly. I'm curious. Do any of you have like big statements that you can be like, this is my fact. This is like my when I'm down the pub with my mates. They're like, plants, and you can be like, bam, and they're like, what?
I think what interests me is that our world is quite a unique world to work in. Hopefully that will change. And when you go to parties and you tell people what you do, and you think it's just never, I just think it's normal, and they're like, what? You do what? And yeah, it's like that, like you said, hooking people in, and then I don't know, when I hear interesting things and sweeping statements, I then want to read more, and I want to learn more. And engage with people that do know. And I think there's only so much time in a film where you can say what you want to say. So yeah, drawing that together, and I'm feeling thirsty. David Attenborough, he always makes us feel thirsty. We want to know more, we want to engage more, we want to be better people on our planet. So I guess maybe that's how I see it. But yeah, important to challenge what people say all the time, definitely.
I like that, this idea of making you thirsty. There we go. Good, I like it. So we have got one last question then. This is to Thomas. Should we introduce more non-native trees if our native trees are struggling with climate change?
That is a good question. I mean, part of the reason plantation forests are grown is you get the carbon storage, but also it's the commercial benefit. But a lot of people don't know that because of the complexity of native forests actually store far more carbon than planted forests. So growing native forests is actually a great way to fight climate change. So yeah.
Interesting. It just reminded me of something I saw recently about a project that's happening, I can't remember exactly where, somewhere near Birmingham, and they are trying to maximise growing a diverse native forest and maximise that for carbon capture. And they plant they plant loads of different species and all together, and like native species that are native to the UK or have been here a long time, and then they look in each. Then after a while, I can't remember how many years it is, they clear out some paths so they can get to them, and then they are growing. They're looking in different areas, which is the healthiest, the best tree that's growing here, and then what they do is they then manage the trees around that tree to allow that one tree to grow really. To grow really tall and to grow well as well, so that's then useful wood. Because one of the problems with if you're growing a tree for trees to be used, they need to be the right type of wood to be used for house structure or whatever you're going to use them for. But they manage it to all around that one individual tree, and their sort of results that they're getting at the moment are showing that they're capturing quite a lot. They think they're capturing quite a lot of carbon, certainly more than you get in those in the plantation, partly with the different heights and
Cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A really interesting piece of research.
Oh, we will try and find out where that is and
It's
stick it somewhere.
in Staffordshire.
It's
It's run by Birmingham University, and again, like what you're saying, too, they have carbon capturing. They have platforms, just like you would see if you were building a house. And then they release the carbon into the atmosphere, and then they will see from the top of the tree how the tree reacts, and then from the flora at the bottom and the very much the understory, how the soil level reacts as well. So they've got various research projects. Like it's literally littered. The ground is littered with all these various research projects to see what happens. And I think it's been going for only a small amount of time. It's a relatively new project, and I think they will put those towers, scaffolding towers, in another part of the country at some point as well. But it's the only one in this part of Europe, so it'll be interesting to see how they mimic that research in the end. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, there we go. I think that about wraps up our first live stream, but make sure that you tune back in at 1:30, where we are going to be, we've got 5 more awesome videos, and we're going to be chatting about the possibilities of plants, looking at how we can push them to do cool things and bring loads more really cool plant science. Can we get a round of applause for all the people at home and in the studio who've been involved? That's brilliant. You guys are awesome. Woo! Thank you. And we've just got one last one from Ben. Thanks, Ben. No question. Big thank you to everyone who's put this together. Great quality videos. Yeah, they are. High five to everyone who made a video. Love the chat. I might try going some spirulina at home, inspired by Mick. Brilliant. Anyway, we're going to go now, and we will see you at 1:30. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Wave.